I should have known that peace in my home was just the silence before the storm. The moment my phone lit up that Thursday, block number, midnight, I thought it was a robocall. Instead, I watched my own daughter, Ivy, bleeding and broken, stare into a camera while a masked man pressed a gun to my son's head. "Victor, you want your children alive?" His voice was low, almost bored. "Listen close. Today, your daughter chooses who survives. She kills her own brother, or we kill them both while you watch." The screen shook as Ivy screamed. Ryder's eyes searched for mine, wild and desperate. "Dad, help." I couldn't reach them. I couldn't even move. All the training, all the medals, wasted. I was just a father, tearing at the walls inside my skull, begging for air. The call ended. And in that dead silence, something inside me burned down to the wire. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. Even as the blue cold of dawn crept through the window, I didn't let myself hope. I had seen betrayal in every form, but nothing like this. No enemies, just a cartel's camera, a sick test of blood over blood. I covered the house in darkness, the old Delta way. Security feeds, burner phones, quiet calls to Mason and Grant, men who owed me for life, who knew what it meant when I said, "My kids." They took my kids. In the fragments of that first video, Ivy's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She kept whispering over and over, "Dad, Dad." And Ryder, God, he'd grown. Almost a man, thinking he could shield his sister from monsters with a word. The cartel sent a second message before sunrise. "Still Ivy," eyes swollen, this time holding a knife. The man's gloved hand wrapped around hers, forcing the blade to Ryder's throat, threatening to slice skin if she hesitated. "Victor, choose. Watch her kill him, or let us kill them both. Your choice, soldier." But the choice was never theirs. Or mine. Only the cartel's game, one I would burn to the ground inch by inch. Back in those Delta years, we had a saying, "Survive by not feeling." But you never forget the look in your child's eyes when the world goes from safe to war zone. That's when you stop being a man and start being a weapon. I stared into the burn of my own reflection that morning. Older, weaker, but not beaten. Ivy and Ryder were all I had. I called Mason. "Gear up. It's the cartel. No cops. They want a show. I'll give them one they never imagined." Less than an hour later, I was loading gear into my truck, Mason's dog tags around my knuckles, Grant loading maps and rifles like prayer beads. I replayed Ivy's terrified eyes in my head. Every step I took, every plan I whispered, I made a silent vow. I would never be the kind of father who watched his kids die on a screen. Not for their sick amusement. Not for anyone. As the sun cut over the rooftops, I abandoned who Victor had been. Only a father remained. A father who would cross any line ever drawn to save his children. But the game wasn't over yet. The real nightmare was just beginning. Mason arrived first, before the sun fully climbed over the trees. He didn't knock, just keyed in through the back door like old times, carrying a duffel bag that smelled like gun oil and memory. He took one look at my face and set the bag down without a word. "How long ago?" he asked. 18 hours. He nodded slowly. That was all we needed. 18 hours meant they were still moving them, still setting up their stage. In this world, silence was mercy. It meant your kids were still bargaining chips, not bodies. Grant showed up an hour later with hardware I hadn't seen since Kandahar. Laptop, encrypted satellite phone, 2 external drives, and something that looked like a portable radar, but wasn't. He didn't ask questions either. The three of us had been through enough missions to know when the brief was written in a father's eyes. We spread everything out on my dining room table, the same table where Ivy used to do her homework, where Ryder learned to play chess. Now it was a war room. "They sent 2 videos," I said, sliding my phone across the table. "Cartel. Probably Los Sangre Fria. They've been pushing north for 6 months." Grant pulled up the video. Watched it once. His jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. Mason leaned over his shoulder, and I saw the flash of rage in his eyes. the kind that doesn't explode, just burns low and patient. They're playing with you, Mason said. Psychological warfare. They want you to break before they even ask for money. They're not asking for money, I said quietly. They want a show. Grant looked up. Then we give them one. He started pulling metadata from the video file, location stamps, device signatures, network pings. It wasn't much, but it was a thread. Mason opened his own laptop and pulled up contacts I didn't even know still existed. Black Ops contractors, DEA informants, border agents who owed us favors from missions we couldn't talk about. While they worked, I stood at the window and watched the street. Normal people living normal lives. A woman walking her dog. A kid riding his bike. I used to be one of them. I used to believe that raising good kids and staying quiet meant the violence would leave you alone. I was wrong. My phone buzzed. Another message. Blocked number. I didn't want to open it. My thumb hovered over the screen for 5 seconds that felt like forever. But I had no choice. If they were still sending videos, my kids were still breathing. I opened it. This time, there was no mask. Just a man's face. Latino, maybe 40, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that belonged to someone who'd never been told no. Victor, he said, my name rolling off his tongue like a curse. I see you're a patient man. Good. Patience is a virtue. But your daughter, she's running out of time. The camera panned, and there she was again. Ivy, my little girl who used to be afraid of thunderstorms. Now she was tied to a metal chair in a concrete room, her face bruised, her hands shaking so hard the rope burned her wrists. Ryder was on the floor beside her, duct tape over his mouth, blood dried under his nose. The man walked into frame and handed Ivy a knife. No, I whispered. Mason and Grant stopped typing. They heard the break in my voice. Victor, your daughter has one job, the man continued. Cut her brother. Just once. Across the arm. Nothing fatal. Just proof that she can follow orders. Ivy shook her head, tears streaming. I can't. I can't. Then I'll cut you both. The man grabbed her hand, forced the knife toward Ryder's arm. Ryder tried to pull away, but his hands were zip-tied behind his back. Ivy screamed. Raw, guttural, the kind of sound that shatters a father from the inside out. The screen went black. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until Mason's hand landed on my shoulder. We're getting them back, he said. Low. Steady. A promise. Grant turned his laptop toward me. I've got a location. Not exact, but close. There's a network signature bouncing off a tower 15 miles outside the border. Old factory district. Abandoned since the Cartel wars in 2019. How sure are you? 80%. That wasn't good enough. But it was all we had. We move tonight, I said. Mason shook his head. You move tonight, you're emotional. Emotional gets people killed. My kids are alive because they need them alive, Mason cut in. They're bait, Victor. You go in hot, you play their game. We go in cold, we end it. He was right. I hated that he was right. Grant stood and started pulling gear from his duffel. Tactical vests. Night vision. Suppressed sidearms. He tossed me a vest, and I caught it on instinct. We surveil first, Grant said. Confirm the location. Count the guards. Map the exits. Then we extract. And if they hurt them again? They won't, Mason said. Not yet. They're waiting for you to beg. To offer money. To break. When you don't, they'll escalate. That's when we move. I wanted to argue. Every part of me wanted to grab a rifle and storm that factory right now. But I'd trained for this. I knew better. Emotion was the enemy's weapon. Discipline was mine. We spent the next 6 hours planning. Grant pulled satellite images of the factory. Mason contacted a former informant who confirmed cartel activity in the area. I ran through tactical scenarios in my head. Entry points, hostage extraction, suppression fire. By the time the sun started to set, we had a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was cold, calculated, lethal. I looked at the photo of Ivy and Ryder on my mantle. taken 2 years ago at Ryder's high school graduation. They were smiling. Safe. Whole. I made a silent promise to that photo. I would bring them home. No matter what it cost. No matter how many lives I had to take. Mason checked his rifle one last time. You ready? I pulled on my vest, tightened the straps, and felt the weight of 20 years of training settle over my shoulders. I was born ready. We loaded into Mason's truck and drove into the night. No lights. No sirens. Just three ghosts moving toward a war that only we could see. The cartel wanted a show. They were about to get one they'd never forget. The factory rose out of the darkness like a broken tooth. Rusted metal, shattered windows, concrete walls tagged with cartel symbols. We parked 2 miles out and moved on foot, night vision turning the world into shades of green and gray. Mason took point. Grant covered the rear. I moved between them, my rifle tight against my chest, every breath controlled. We'd done this 100 times in a dozen countries, but this time was different. This time, my children were inside. We reached the perimeter fence at 0200 hours. No cameras, no motion sensors, just 2 guards smoking cigarettes near a side entrance, their rifles slung loose over their shoulders. Sloppy, overconfident. Mason signaled. I moved left. He moved right. 30 seconds later, both guards were unconscious, zip-tied, and gagged in the shadows. We dragged them into the tall grass where no one would find them until morning. Grant hacked the door lock with a bypass tool, and we slipped inside. The factory floor was massive, industrial equipment abandoned years ago, metal beams overhead, puddles of stagnant water reflecting our movements. The air smelled like rust and rot. I heard voices. Spanish. Laughter. Somewhere deep inside the building. We moved through the shadows, using the equipment as cover. My heart hammered, but my hands stayed steady. I trained my body to ignore fear. It was just noise. Grant tapped my shoulder and pointed up. A catwalk overhead. 2 more guards, rifles in hand, scanning the floor below. We couldn't take them out without alerting everyone inside. Mason pulled a small device from his pack, electromagnetic pulse, short range. He set the timer for 10 seconds, tossed it onto the catwalk, and we ducked behind a rusted loader. The pulse hit. The guards' radios died. Their flashlights flickered out. They cursed, confused, fumbling in the dark. That's when Mason moved. 2 suppressed shots. Both guards dropped without a sound. We kept moving. The voices grew louder. I recognized one of them, the man from the video. Dominic. His voice was smooth, almost bored, like torturing children was just another Tuesday. We reached a metal door at the back of the factory. Light leaked through the cracks. I pressed my ear against it and heard him speaking. Your father thinks he's a hero. He thinks he can save you. But heroes don't exist anymore, little girl. Only men who choose survival. Ivy's voice, broken and raw. Please, just let us go. Let you go. Dominic laughed. I gave you a choice. You didn't take it. So now we wait for Daddy to come crawling. Ryder's voice, muffled. He's not coming. Oh, but he is. I looked at Mason. He nodded. Grant checked his weapon. We stacked up at the door, breach formation, automatic. I kicked it open. The room exploded into chaos. Dominic spun, reaching for his sidearm, but Mason put 2 rounds in his shoulder before he could draw. He dropped, screaming. 3 other men reached for their guns. Grant dropped 1. I dropped 2. All headshots. All clean. Then I saw them. Ivy, tied to a chair in the center of the room, her face pale and streaked with tears. Ryder on the floor beside her, duct tape over his mouth, blood crusted on his forehead. Dad. Ivy's voice cracked, disbelief flooding her eyes. I crossed the room in 3 strides and cut her restraints. She collapsed into my arms, shaking so hard I thought she might break. I held her tight, my rifle still in one hand, scanning the room for threats. I've got you, I whispered. You're safe. Grant cut Ryder loose. The kid tried to stand, but his legs gave out. Grant caught him, steadied him. Ryder pulled the tape off his mouth and coughed. gasping for air. How did you find us? Ryder asked. Later, I said. We move now. Dominic groaned on the floor, clutching his bleeding shoulder. I walked over and pressed my boot against his wound. He screamed. How many more? I asked. He spat blood at my feet. Enough to kill you all. I pressed harder. How many? 8, maybe 10, scattered around the building. Mason was already at the door, checking the hallway. We've got company. They heard the shots. I looked at my kids. Ivy could barely stand. Ryder was limping. We couldn't fight our way out with them in this condition. Grant, get them to the exit. North side, near the loading dock. I cleared it on the way in. What about you? Grant asked. I'll cover your exit. Victor, go. Now. Grant didn't argue. He slung Ryder's arm over his shoulder and started moving. Ivy looked back at me, fear flooding her eyes. Dad, don't. I'll be right behind you. I promise. Mason stayed with me. We took positions on either side of the door. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Heavy boots, multiple targets. They came fast. For men, rifles raised, shouting in Spanish. Mason took the first 2. I took the second 2. They dropped before they even saw us. We moved into the hallway. More voices ahead. I pulled a flashbang from my vest, primed it, and tossed it around the corner. The explosion lit up the corridor. Men screamed. We moved through the smoke, dropping targets with surgical precision. By the time we reached the loading dock, Grant had Ivy and Ryder outside. Mason and I covered the rear, backing toward the exit. One more guard appeared, sprinting toward us, rifle raised. I fired twice. He went down. We burst through the door into the night air. Grant was already moving my kids toward the tree line. I scanned the rooftop, the perimeter, looking for snipers. Nothing. We reached the truck. Grant loaded Ivy and Ryder into the back seat. Ivy was crying now, deep, shuddering sobs that broke something inside me. Ryder stared straight ahead, silent, his jaw clenched tight. Mason started the engine. I climbed into the passenger seat and looked back at my kids. You're safe now, I said. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't over. Dominic was still alive. The cartel was still hunting us. And somewhere deep inside me, a darker thought took root. I'd gotten my children back, but I hadn't finished what they started. Grant looked at me. He saw it in my eyes. Victor, let it go. You got them back. That's the mission. I didn't answer. I just stared out the window as we drove into the darkness. Dominic's face burned into my memory. The rescue was over. But the war? The war was just beginning. We drove through the night, headlights off, sticking to back roads that wound through empty fields. Ivy clung to Ryder in the back seat, her fingers digging into his arm like she was afraid he'd vanish. Ryder kept his eyes on the floor, breathing steady but shallow. Grant drove. Mason rode shotgun, both scanning mirrors for tails. No one spoke for the first hour. The silence was thick, heavy with everything we weren't saying. Finally, Ivy broke it. Dad, that man. Dominic. He said you'd come. Said you'd beg. I turned in my seat. I don't beg. She nodded, but her eyes were distant, replaying the horror. He made me hold the knife. Pressed it right here. She touched Ryder's arm, where a thin red line marked the skin. Not deep, just enough to scar. Ryder pulled his sleeve down. I'm fine, Ivy. You're not. Her voice cracked. You tried to talk to them. Told them Dad was Delta Force, that he'd kill them all. Grant glanced in the rear view. Smart move, kid. Bought us time. Mason shifted. We need a safe house. Grant's got one, old fishing cabin, 2 hours north. Off-grid. I nodded. Good. Then we talked to Dominic. All eyes turned to me. Victor, Mason said carefully. You got them out. Mission accomplished. Not yet. I pulled out my burner phone. Dominic was alive. Bleeding, but alive. I'd seen the recognition in his eyes when I pressed my boot down. He knew this wasn't over. Grant slowed the truck. You're not thinking torture. No. I met his gaze. I'm thinking choice. 2 hours later, we pulled into the cabin's dirt drive. Pine trees swallowed us whole. No neighbors. No roads in or out unless you knew the paths. Ivy and Ryder went inside first. Grant stayed with them. Mason and I handled the cargo in the truck bed. Dominic, zip-tied, gagged, shoulder bandaged just enough to stop the bleeding. He glared up at me through swollen eyes. Mason dragged him into the shed out back. Concrete floor, metal walls, one bare bulb swinging overhead. We tied him to a support beam, arms above his head, feet barely touching ground. I pulled the gag. "You'll die for this," he spat. Blood flecked his lips. Plenty of time for threats later. I set up the phone on a tripod, hit record. Same angle they used on my kids. His eyes narrowed. "What is this? Your show?" I stepped back. Mason handed me the knife, the same one from the video. Dull steel, stained. Dominic laughed, wet and ragged. "You think this scares me? I've cut deeper than you ever will, soldier boy." 3 of his enforcers stumbled in next, ones we'd grabbed on the way out. Knocked cold during the exfil. Zip-tied, dumped on the floor like trash. They groaned, coming to. "Meet your men," I said. "Carlos. Javier. Emilio. Loyal dogs." Dominic's laugh died. He twisted against the ropes. "Here's the deal." I knelt in front of him, voice low. "You choose. Kill one of them, or I kill all 3. Slow. You're bluffing." Sweat beaded on his forehead. I pressed the knife to Carlos's throat. The man whimpered. "Wait." Dominic jerked forward. Clock's ticking. I dragged the blade, just enough to draw blood. Carlos screamed. "Stop. You want this." Dominic's eyes darted between his men. "Fine. Emilio. He's weak anyway." Mason hauled Emilio up, forced him in front of Dominic. Cut his ties just enough for Dominic to grab the knife. "Do it," I said. Dominic hesitated. His hand shook. Emilio begged in Spanish, tears streaming. The other 2 watched, frozen. Dominic lunged. The knife sank into Emilio's chest. Once. Twice. Blood sprayed. Emilio dropped, gurgling. Dominic dropped the knife, panting. "There. Happy." I picked up the phone. "Stopped recording." "Not yet." His face twisted. "What more?" "Your empire." I nodded to Mason. He tossed a laptop on the crate. "We've been busy." Grant had uploaded everything during the drive. Bank accounts, shipment logs, names of crooked cops. DEA-level intel, pulled from Dominic's own servers. Dominic stared. "You hacked me. While you played with my kids." I hit send. Anonymous drops to FBI, Interpol, every agency hunting Los Sangre Fria. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Mason fished it out. Texts pouring in, panic from his lieutenants. Feds everywhere. Borders closing. Dominic sagged. "No." Choice number 2. I leaned close. "Call off your dogs. Tell them to stand down. Or watch it all burn." He spat again. "Never." I shrugged. Walked to the door. "Your men turn on you next." Betrayal stings, doesn't it? Inside the cabin, Ivy was asleep on the couch, Ryder beside her, watching the window. Grant brewed coffee. "He talk?" Grant asked. "Some." I sat heavy. "But it's unraveling." Mason came in. "Javier and Carlos. They're making calls. Turning state's evidence already." "Good." I rubbed my eyes. Dominic's scream echoed from the shed, maybe realizing his world was gone. Ivy stirred. "Dad? Is it over?" "Not yet, baby." I pulled her close. She smelled like sweat and fear, but she was here, breathing. Ryder met my eyes. "What now?" "Now we wait." I glanced out the window. Dawn creeping. Sirens faint in the distance. Feds closing in. But Dominic wasn't done. I knew it. He had one more play. And when it came, I'd be ready. Mason's radio crackled. "Victor, he's loose." I grabbed my rifle. Burst out the door. Dominic stood in the shed doorway, Javier's pistol shaking in his hand. Blood everywhere. His men dead at his feet. "You took everything," he snarled. "Now I take you." The shot rang out. The bullet tore past my shoulder and shattered the cabin window behind me. Glass exploded. Ivy screamed inside. I dropped, rolled left, rifle up. Dominic fired again. Wild. Desperate. The shot went high. Mason came from the side, low and fast. He tackled Dominic before he could aim a third time. The gun skittered across gravel. Mason drove his knee into Dominic's wounded shoulder. The scream that followed was pure agony. I stood, walked over, and kicked the pistol away. Should have stayed tied up. Dominic gasped, face twisted. You can't win this. My people, they'll hunt you forever. I crouched beside him. Your people are already running. Grant appeared in the doorway, laptop in hand. FBI just raided 3 of his stash houses. DEA hit the border tunnels. It's all over the wire. Dominic's eyes went wide. What did you do? What you did to my kids? I pulled out my phone, showed him the screen. Every financial record, every shipment route, every dirty cop on his payroll. All of it uploaded to a federal server 2 hours ago. You destroyed me, he whispered. No, you destroyed yourself when you touched my family. Mason hauled him up, dragged him back to the shed. This time we chained him properly. Wrists, ankles, steel links bolted to concrete. No escape. Inside the cabin, Ivy sat curled on the couch, Ryder's arm around her. Both pale, both shaking. Is he? Ivy couldn't finish. Contained, I said. He won't hurt anyone again. Ryder looked up. What happens now? Good question. I'd gotten my kids back. Exposed the cartel. But Dominic was right about one thing. His people wouldn't stop. Not unless I gave them a reason. Grant set the laptop on the table. We've got a decision to make. Turn Dominic over to the feds. He gets life in prison. Maybe. Or he cuts a deal, testifies against bigger fish, walks in 10 years. Or, Mason asked, or we finish it. The room went quiet. Ivy stared at me, searching my face for the father she knew. The one who taught her to ride a bike, who read her bedtime stories. Not the man who'd just dismantled the cartel in 48 hours. Dad, she said softly, don't become him. Her words hit harder than any bullet. I sat beside her. I won't. Promise. Promise. But promises were complicated. Because 3 hours later, Dominic's phone, still in Mason's possession, started ringing. Not texts. Calls. Frantic voices demanding answers. Mason put one on speaker. A lieutenant named Raphael. Dominic, the feds are everywhere. Half our crew's arrested. What do we do? I took the phone. Raphael, this is Victor. Silence. Then, the father. That's right. Tell your men to stand down. Walk away. Disappear. Or I'll do to you what I did to your boss. You think we're afraid of one man? No. But you should be afraid of what happens when that one man has nothing left to lose. I paused. I have recordings. Evidence. Enough to bury every single one of you. The feds already have half. I'm holding the rest. You come after me or my family again, it all goes public. Understand? Raphael hesitated. I could hear him breathing, calculating. We're done with you, he finally said. But Dominic answers to the law now. Not you. I hung up. Made 5 more calls just like it. Some threatened. Some begged. Some just hung up. But the message was clear. The cartel was fractured. Leaderless. Bleeding out. By sunrise, news broke nationwide. Major cartel bust on southern border. 23 arrests. Millions in seized assets. The FBI credited an anonymous tip with unprecedented intel. Grant closed the laptop. It's over. Not yet, I said. I walked back to the shed. Dominic sat slumped against the beam, face pale from blood loss. I set a medical kit on the floor. Antibiotics. Bandages. Water. Why, he rasped. Because my daughter asked me not to become you. I tended his wound properly this time. Cleaned it, stitched it, wrapped it tight. He winced, but didn't scream. You're turning me in, he said. Yes. I'll cut a deal. Be out in 10 years. Maybe. Or maybe your own men testify against you first. Javier and Carlos. They're already talking to federal prosecutors. Gave up everything. Names. Locations. Dates. His face went ashen. They betrayed me. Like you betrayed every family you destroyed. I stood. You gave my daughter a choice. Kill or die. I'm giving you one too. Cooperate with the feds. Give them everything. Every name, every route, every operation. Dismantle what's left of your empire from the inside. And if I refuse, then you rot in a cell for the rest of your life while your men walk free. Your legacy dies forgotten. He stared at the concrete. Minutes passed. Finally, he looked up. What do you get out of this? My kids sleep safe. That's all I've ever wanted. 2 days later, a federal convoy arrived. For black SUVs, heavily armed agents. I met them at the road, handed over Dominic in cuffs, along with a flash drive containing every piece of evidence we'd compiled. The lead agent, a woman named Agent Paige Hartley, studied me carefully. You're the anonymous tip? Does it matter? It does if you broke laws getting this intel. Then I guess you'll never know. She almost smiled. Your kids are safe now, Mr. Victor. We'll make sure of it. I watched the convoy disappear down the dirt road, Dominic in the back seat, head down. No more king, just a prisoner. Inside, Ivy and Ryder packed their things. We were moving. New city, new names, new life. Mason and Grant had already arranged it. Witness protection without the feds knowing. Ivy hugged me tight before we left. You kept your promise. Always will. Ryder shook my hand. Firm. Strong. Thanks, Dad. For everything. We loaded the truck and drove north as the sun broke over the mountains. No one followed. No threats. Just quiet roads stretching ahead. 3 months later, the trial made headlines. Dominic pleaded guilty to 47 counts. Racketeering, trafficking, kidnapping, murder, life without parole. His cartel collapsed. Splinter groups fought for scraps, but the empire was gone. And in a small town 2,000 miles away, I watched my kids start over. Ivy enrolled in college. Ryder got a job. Normal lives. Safe lives. The war was over, but the scars remained. And every night, I stood guard, just in case. The courthouse steps felt longer than any combat zone I'd ever crossed. Ivy walked beside me, her hand gripping mine so tight I felt her pulse through her fingers. Ryder flanked her other side, jaw set, eyes scanning the crowd of reporters and cameras like he was already learning to be his sister's shield. Ms. Ivy, how do you feel about testifying today? A microphone shoved into her face. I stepped between them. No comment. Agent Hartley met us at the security checkpoint. They're ready for you. Dominic's already inside. His lawyers tried to get a continuance, but the judge denied it. Ivy's breath hitched. I have to see him again. Only for a few minutes, Hartley said gently. You'll be on the stand. He'll be at the defense table. You don't have to look at him. But I knew my daughter. She would look. She needed to. The courtroom was packed. Federal prosecutors, defense attorneys in expensive suits, sketch artists, victims' families I didn't recognize. People whose lives Dominic had shattered long before he touched mine. Dominic sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled. He'd lost weight. His face was gaunt, eyes hollow. When Ivy walked in, he looked up, just for a second. Then his lawyer whispered something, and he stared at the table. The judge, an older woman named Judge Amelia Brennan, called the court to order. We're here for the testimony of Ivy Langston in the matter of United States versus Dominic Vargas. Ms. Langston, please take the stand. Ivy stood. Her legs shook. Ryder squeezed her shoulder once, silent strength. She walked to the witness stand like she was walking through fire. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named Colin Hayes, approached gently. Ms. Langston, can you tell the court what happened on the night of September 14th? Ivy's voice came out small. They took us from the parking lot. My brother and me. We were leaving the movies. Who took you? 3 men. They had guns. Shoved us into a van. Her hands twisted in her lap. We didn't know why. Didn't know what we did. What happened next? She closed her eyes. They drove for hours. Took our phones. Tied our hands. Ryder kept asking what they wanted. They just laughed. Colin nodded. And when you arrived at the location? They locked us in a room. Concrete. Cold. No windows. Her voice cracked. Then he came in. Who came in? Dominic Vargas. She looked at him now, dead in the eyes. He told us our father was Delta Force. Said he wanted to send a message. That soldiers who think they're heroes need to learn what real power looks like. The courtroom was silent. Every eye on my daughter. What did he ask you to do? Colin's voice was gentle but firm. Ivy's tears came. He gave me a knife. Told me to cut my brother. Said if I didn't, he'd kill us both. A woman in the gallery gasped. Judge Brennan's expression hardened. Did you comply? Ivy's voice broke. I had to. Just a little. On Ryder's arm. He screamed for me not to, but I couldn't let him die. Ryder sat forward in the gallery, hands clasped, tears streaming. I put my hand on his shoulder. Colin stepped closer. Ivy, that wasn't your choice. You understand that, right? You were forced. I know, but I still did it. She looked at the jury. I still hurt my brother, and I'll carry that forever. Dominic's lawyer, a slick man named Preston Whitmore, stood. Objection. The witness is editorializing. Judge Brennan shot him a look. Overruled. This is a victim impact statement. She can speak her truth. Colin continued. What happened after that? They filmed it. Sent it to my dad. Dominic said he wanted my father to watch me destroy my family. That's what he kept saying. Destroy your family, or I'll do it for you. How long were you held captive? 2 days. Felt like forever. And how were you rescued? Ivy's eyes found mine across the room. My dad. He came for us. Him and his friends. They got us out. Preston stood again. Objection. The circumstances of the rescue are not relevant to. Sit down. Counselor. Judge Brennan snapped. I'll decide what's relevant. Colin asked a few more questions. Details about the psychological torture, the threats, the conditions. Every answer Ivy gave, she grew stronger. Her voice steadied. Her shoulders straightened. Then it was Preston's turn. He approached like a snake. Ms. Langston, you testified that you were forced to harm your brother. But isn't it true that you could have refused? Ivy blinked. He had a gun to Ryder's head. But you made a choice. You picked up that knife. Correct. Objection. Colin shot up, badgering the witness. Sustained. Judge Brennan leaned forward. Mr. Whitmore, tread carefully. Preston smiled, cold and calculated. I'm simply establishing that Ms. Langston had agency in this situation. That I was 17 years old. Ivy cut in, voice sharp. He was a grown man with a gun and an army. You think I had a choice? The courtroom erupted. Judge Brennan banged her gavel. Order. Preston tried again. Your father is a trained operative. Isn't it possible this entire incident was staged too? I stood. Couldn't help it. You son of a... Agent Hartley pulled me back down. Don't. Let the system work. Colin objected again. The judge sustained. Preston finally backed off, realizing he was losing the jury with every word. Ivy was excused. She stepped down, walked past Dominic without a glance, and collapsed into my arms in the gallery. Silent sobs. Ryder testified next. Told his story. How he tried to protect Ivy. How he begged them to take him instead. How he watched Dominic enjoy their suffering like it was entertainment. 3 other victims testified. A woman whose husband was killed by Dominic's crew. A man who lost his daughter to trafficking. A federal agent whose partner died in a cartel ambush. By the end of the day, the jury looked sick. Closing arguments came 2 days later. Colin laid out the evidence, recordings, financial records, witness testimony. He painted Dominic as a monster who built an empire on suffering. Preston argued entrapment, coercion, lack of direct evidence. It was desperate. Everyone in that room knew it. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood. On all counts, we find the defendant guilty. Ivy's hand found mine. Squeezed. I looked at Ryder. He nodded once. It was done. Sentencing came a week later. Judge Brennan didn't hesitate. Mr. Vargas, you have shown a complete disregard for human life. This court sentences you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Dominic showed no emotion, just stood, turned, and let the marshals lead him away. Outside, reporters swarmed. This time, Ivy stopped. Face the cameras. I want other victims to know. You can survive this. You can find your voice. And justice is real. That night, we sat in our new living room. Safe house turned permanent home. Ivy curled up on the couch, Ryder beside her. Both exhausted. Both free. Dad, Ivy said quietly. Thank you. For not becoming him. I pulled them both close. You saved me from that. Both of you. The trial was over. Dominic was gone. But the healing? That was just beginning. The headline hit every major news network within an hour. Cartel kingpin receives life without parole. But sitting in our living room, watching the coverage on mute, the words felt empty. Justice was supposed to feel like relief. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something else. Ivy sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, staring at Dominic's face frozen on the screen. His mugshot. Cold. Lifeless. Already a ghost. He can't hurt us anymore, she whispered. No, he can't, I said. But Ryder stood at the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. His people can. He wasn't wrong. The sentencing didn't erase the threat. Dominic's cartel had fractured, yes, but fractures created sharp edges. Splinter groups fighting for territory. Loyalists seeking revenge. The kind of chaos that left bodies in its wake. Agent Hartley called that evening. We're monitoring chatter. No direct threats against your family, but we're keeping eyes on known associates. How long? I asked. As long as it takes. That wasn't an answer. That was a warning wrapped in bureaucracy. The next morning, Ivy asked to visit her old neighborhood. The place we'd left behind when we went into hiding. I almost said no. Too risky. Too soon. But Mason reminded me that healing meant facing what was lost. We drove there at dawn, Mason and Grant flanking us in a second vehicle. The street looked the same, tree-lined, quiet, normal. Our old house had new owners. A young couple, their kids' toys scattered across the lawn. Ivy stared at the porch where she used to sit and read. I miss that girl, she said softly. She's still in there. I said, no, Dad. She died in that warehouse. The words cut deeper than any blade. Because she was right. The Ivy who left for the movies that night never came home. In her place was someone older, harder, haunted by choices she never should have had to make. Ryder walked the perimeter of the yard, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning. Always scanning now. He didn't trust stillness anymore. Neither of them did. We drove to the cemetery next. Ivy wanted to visit her mother's grave. My wife, Elena, had died 4 years earlier. Cancer, quick and merciless. I told the kids back then that we'd survive anything as long as we had each other. I didn't know how much that promise would cost. Ivy knelt at the headstone, traced her mother's name with her fingers. Mom, I wish you were here. You'd know what to say? Dad tries, but... She looked back at me. He's still fighting wars in his head. I wanted to argue, to tell her I was fine. But the truth sat heavy between us. I wasn't fine. I'd saved my kids, but the violence I'd unleashed to do it still lived in my veins, hungry and restless. Ryder stood beside his sister. Mom would have told us to forgive ourselves. That's what she always said, right? Forgive yourself first. I don't know how, Ivy whispered. Me neither. They sat there together, two kids who'd grown up too fast, carrying scars no parent should ever have to witness. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My instinct was to ignore it, but something made me answer. Victor. A woman's voice. Shaky. Familiar. Who is this? Natalie. Dominic's, his sister. I pulled over. Signaled Mason to stop. What do you want? To apologize. She was crying. For what my brother did. To your family. To everyone. I didn't respond. Didn't trust it. I know you won't believe me, she continued. But I didn't know. Not until the trial. Not until I heard what he made your daughter do. Why are you calling? Because he's dying. The words hung in the air. What? Stomach cancer. Stage 4. The prison doctors say he has 6 months. Maybe less. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction. Cosmic justice. But mostly, I felt nothing. Dominic's death wouldn't erase what he'd done. Wouldn't give Ivy back the innocence he stole. I'm sorry for your loss, I said flatly. Hung up. Ivy watched me from the back seat. Who was that? Nobody. Dad. I sighed. Dominic's dying. Cancer. She absorbed this. Nodded slowly. Good. Ryder looked out the window. Will that make it easier? No, Ivy said. But at least he won't die old and comfortable. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about choices. The ones Dominic forced on Ivy. The ones I'd made in return. The bodies I'd left behind to save my kids. Were they justified? Necessary? Or had I just become another kind of monster? Mason found me on the porch at 2 in the morning, staring at nothing. You did what you had to, he said, reading my mind. Did I? Or did I just prove I'm no different than him? You're nothing like him. Mason sat beside me. Dominic destroyed families for profit. You destroyed him to save yours. That's the difference. Then why does it feel the same? Because you're a good man, Victor. Good men carry the weight. Bad men don't. 3 weeks later, Ivy started college. Criminal justice major. She said she wanted to help other victims find their voices. Ryder enrolled in a community program for trauma survivors, learning to counsel others who'd lived through violence. I watched them rebuild themselves, piece by fragile piece, and realized something. I'd given them justice, but they were giving themselves healing. And that was something I couldn't do for them. Agent Hartley called one last time. Dominic's cartel is officially dismantled. The splinter groups are fighting each other, not looking for you. You're clear. Clear, I repeated. The word felt foreign. You can live again, Victor. But could I? Living meant letting go. And letting go meant trusting that the world wouldn't come for my kids the second I stopped watching the shadows. That weekend, we sat down for dinner together, something we hadn't done since before the kidnapping. Ivy made pasta. Ryder set the table. I poured water, hands still steady despite the storm inside. To us, Ivy said, raising her glass. We survived. To Mom, Ryder added. She'd be proud. To choices, I said. The ones we make moving forward. We clinked glasses, ate in comfortable silence. And for the first time in months, I saw them smile. Real smiles. The kind that reached their eyes. Dominic's sentencing was the end of one chapter. But sitting there with my kids, I realized we were finally ready to write the next one. Together. Scarred but unbroken. Lost but not destroyed. Justice had been served. Now came the harder part. Learning to live with it. 6 months after the sentencing, we moved again. Not because we had to, but because Ivy asked. She wanted distance from the memories, the courthouse, the old neighborhood, the places where fear still lived in shadows. Our new home sat on the edge of a small town in Montana. Mountains on one side, open sky on the other. The kind of place where people nodded hello but didn't ask questions. Where silence felt like peace instead of threat. Ivy's therapist was a woman named Dr. Harper Quinn, a trauma specialist who'd worked with veterans and assault survivors. Twice a week, Ivy drove 40 minutes to her office and came back exhausted but lighter somehow. She didn't talk much about the sessions at first, just ate dinner quietly, then disappeared into her room. But one night, 3 months in, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and spoke. Dr. Quinn says I'm carrying survivor's guilt, that I blame myself for hurting Ryder even though I had no choice. I set down my coffee. You know it wasn't your fault. Knowing and feeling are different things, Dad. Her eyes were distant. Every time I close my eyes, I see that knife. Feel his blood on my hands. Hear him screaming. I reached across the table. She took my hand. Dr. Quinn says the only way through it is to forgive myself. But how do you forgive yourself for something unforgivable? By understanding you survived something no one should have to survive, I said. And you're still here. Still fighting. That takes more strength than you know. She squeezed my hand. Were you ever scared? In Delta? Did you ever have to do things that haunted you? I'd never told my kids about the missions, the things I'd seen, the choices I'd made under orders. But sitting there, watching my daughter wrestle with demons I knew too well, I realized she needed the truth. Yes, I said quietly. Afghanistan. 2011. We were hunting a high-value target. Intel said he was hiding in a compound. When we breached, there were civilians inside. Women. Kids. We had seconds to decide, abort or continue. I gave the order to continue. Ivy listened, eyes wide. Turns out the target wasn't there. We'd hit the wrong building, cleared it without casualties, but I paused. I carried that weight for years. What if I'd been wrong? What if someone had gotten hurt because I made a call too fast? How did you forgive yourself? I didn't. Not for a long time. Your mom helped. She told me that beating myself up wouldn't change the past, that the only thing I could do was make better choices moving forward. Ivy absorbed this. Do you still think about it? Every day? But it doesn't control me anymore. That's the difference. She nodded slowly. Dr. Quinn says the same thing. That trauma doesn't disappear. You just learn to live with it. She's right. Ryder's healing looked different. He didn't talk to therapists, didn't cry, didn't break down. Instead, he ran. Every morning at 5, he'd lace up his shoes and disappear into the mountains for hours. I found him one morning, 3 miles up a trail, sitting on a rock, staring at nothing. You okay? I asked. He didn't look at me. I couldn't protect her, Dad. I tried. Told them to take me instead. They just laughed. I sat beside him. You were 17 and outnumbered. There was nothing you could do. But you could. You got us out. Because I had training, resources, a team. You had your voice and your courage. That's what kept Ivy sane in that room. Knowing you were there, fighting for her. He finally looked at me. Eyes red. I keep having this dream. That I'm back in that warehouse. Tied up, watching her hold the knife. But this time, I can't scream. Can't move. Can't do anything. Nightmares are your brain processing trauma. I said. They'll fade. Takes time. How much time? Years, maybe. But they get quieter. He stood, started running again. I watched him disappear down the trail, legs pumping, arms swinging. Running from ghosts I couldn't chase away for him. That evening, I gathered both kids in the living room. Told them something I should have said months ago. I need to apologize. They looked confused. For what I became during the rescue. For the violence. For making you witness that side of me. Ivy shook her head. Dad, you saved us. I did. But I also killed people. Hurt people. Made choices that. I struggled for words. I became the thing I always fought against. A man willing to do anything. Cross any line. Ryder leaned forward. You think we blame you? I think you should understand who your father really is. Not a hero. Just a man who got lucky. Ivy stood, walked over, sat beside me. You're not a monster, Dad. Monsters enjoy the pain. You carried it. There's a difference. Ryder joined us. Besides, we're all carrying something now. Might as well carry it together. We sat there, 3 broken people holding each other up, and for the first time since the kidnapping, I felt something shift. Not healing, not yet. But hope. The fragile kind. The kind that grows and cracks. The following weeks, we established routines. Ivy enrolled in online classes, working toward her degree. Ryder got a part-time job at a local outdoor store, learning to guide hiking tours. I started volunteering at the VA, talking to veterans struggling with PTSD. One night, Mason called. How are they doing? Better. Slowly. You. Grant and I are thinking of visiting. If that's okay. More than okay. They arrived the next weekend. We grilled steaks, told old stories, laughed for the first time in what felt like years. Ivy sat with Grant, asking about his family, his life after the military. Ryder challenged Mason to a chess match and actually won. After dinner, Mason pulled me aside. You did good, Victor. Real good. They did the hard part. I just kept them alive. That's not nothing. Maybe not. But watching Ivy smile, really smile, at something Grant said. Watching Ryder joke with Mason like the weight on his shoulders had lightened just a fraction. That was everything. Before bed, Ivy knocked on my door. Dad, yeah, thank you for letting us heal at our own pace. For not pushing. That's what family does. She hugged me. Tight. The kind of hug that said more than words ever could. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about choices. The one Dominic forced on Ivy. The ones I made in return. The ones we were all making now. To keep going. To forgive ourselves. To believe that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. My greatest mission wasn't destroying a cartel or rescuing my kids from a warehouse. It was this. Right here. Helping them find peace in a world that tried to steal it from them. And we were getting there. One day. One choice. One moment of healing at a time. Winter came hard to Montana that year, blanketing everything in white silence. Ivy spent her days bundled in sweaters, nose deep in textbooks, chasing her criminal justice degree online. She'd set up a small office in the corner of the living room, whiteboard covered in case studies, highlighters scattered like confetti. Every night, she'd read her notes aloud to us, practicing arguments like she was already in a courtroom. One evening, she looked up from her laptop, eyes bright. I got accepted to an internship. Victim advocacy program in Denver. Summer session. Pride swelled in my chest. That's amazing. Ryder paused mid-bite of his sandwich. Denver? That's 4 hours away. I know. Ivy bit her lip. But it's a chance to help people like us. We talked it through over dinner. Pros and cons. The fear of her being out there, exposed. The need for her to spread her wings. In the end, we agreed. She'd go, but with precautions. Encrypted phone. Weekly check-ins. Mason teaching her basic self-defense. Watching her pack that spring felt like letting go of a lifeline. But when she hugged me goodbye, her grip was steady. I'll be fine, Dad. You've taught me how. She was right. And damn if that didn't hurt and heal at the same time. Ryder threw himself into his guiding work. Started leading groups up the mountain trails, families, corporate retreats, even a few veterans looking for solitude. He moved like he belonged there, pointing out wildlife tracks, sharing stories about the land. One afternoon, I joined one of his hikes. Watched him connect with a group of teens, all awkward limbs and uncertain futures. You're good at this, I said later, as we cleaned gear in the shed. He shrugged. Feels right. Helping people find their way when they're lost. A beat passed. Like you did for Ivy. Like we're all doing. He wiped down a trekking pole. I'm starting something. Nonprofit. Trauma survivors outdoor therapy. Partner with counselors. Get kids like us into nature. Helps process stuff words can't touch. I stared at him. My boy, once duct-taped and bleeding, now building paths for others. When did you plan this? Months ago. Been talking to Dr. Quinn. She thinks it'll work. I clapped his shoulder. It will. Need help? His grin was pure light. Always. Word spread about Ryder's program. Donations trickled in. Local businesses offered gear. By fall, he had his first group, a dozen kids from broken homes, wide-eyed and wary. I watched from a distance as he led them single file up the trail, pausing to teach breathing exercises when panic surfaced. One girl clung to his words like a raft. By day's end, she'd smiled. Real and raw. That night, Ivy called from Denver. Internships intense. Shadowing lawyers. Met a survivor today, carjacking victim. She reminded me of me. You helping her? I asked. Trying. Told her what you said. Trauma doesn't disappear. You learn to live with it. Silence on the line. Then, Dad, you sound lighter. Do I? Yeah. Like you're breathing easier. Maybe I was. Mason and Grant visited again that Thanksgiving. Brought supplies for Ryder's program. Stayed for pie. Ivy drove home. Internship break aligning perfectly. We set the table with the good plates. The ones Elena picked out years ago. Turkey roasted. Stories flowed. Laughter echoed off log walls. After dinner, Ivy pulled me onto the porch. Stars blanketed the sky. Crisp air bit, just enough to remind you were alive. I saw something today, she said. News clip. Dominic. Prison footage. He's gone. Cancer took him last week. I nodded. Expected the news, but hearing it landed different. No triumph. No relief. Just finality. You okay? She asked. Yeah. Justice came full circle. She leaned against the railing. I used to dream about that moment. Him suffering. Now, I just feel empty. That's healing, I said. When hate stops owning space in your head. Ryder joined us, steaming mugs in hand. Mason says the cartel's remnants are fighting each other. No one's looking for us. Good. Ivy sipped her cocoa. I want to live without looking over my shoulder. We stood there, 3 silhouettes against mountain dark, steam rising like prayers. No more running. No more hiding. Media tried reaching me that month. Some reporter pieced together the story. Delta Dad takes down Cartel. Wanted interviews. Hero narrative. I declined every one. Heroes got spotlights. Spotlights drew danger. We wanted quiet. Instead, I doubled down at the VA, started a support group for parents of trauma survivors. Shared my story, not the violence, but the aftermath. The guilt. The slow rebuild. Men nodded, eyes wet. One whispered. First time someone said it out loud. Ryder's nonprofit launched officially that December. First donor event at the community center. Ivy flew in, gave the keynote. Voice steady, words fierce. Survival isn't the end. It's the starting line. Potential funders packed the room. Checks poured in. By New Year's, Ryder had a real office. Staff. Momentum. Ivy extended her internship. Talked law school. Ryder dreamed bigger, national expansion. Me? I watched. Supported. Let them lead. One night, post-dinner cleanup, Ivy found an old photo album. Elena smiling on our wedding day. Ivy is a toddler. Cake smeared across her face. Ryder's first fish. We flipped pages slow, memories flooding gentle. No pain. Just love. This is us, Ivy said. Whole again. Not whole, Ryder corrected. Stronger. Scars make better stories. I pulled them close. To new beginnings. They echoed it. Hugged tight. The cartel forced Ivy to choose. I gave Dominic the same mirror. But the real choice, the one that mattered, was this. Choosing life. Choosing each other. Choosing forward. And as snow fell soft outside, I knew we'd chosen right. The final piece of our story isn't about bullets or betrayals. It's about the choices that shape us beyond the darkness. We survived something no family should ever face. Ivy and Ryder didn't just come back alive. They came back with hearts scarred but undefeated. One evening, sitting by the fire, Ivy spoke quietly. Dad, if you could go back, change one thing, what would it be? I looked into the flames, thinking, I'd tell you and Ryder to keep fighting. Not with violence, but with your courage. Because no matter how hard the nights get, the dawn always comes. She smiled faintly. And the pain, you learn to carry it, not let it own you. Before we parted that night, I asked them something I asked myself every day. If you could look back at your worst moment and see the road ahead, would you take the same path? Or would you turn around and walk away? That question stays with me, a quiet pulse beneath every choice I make now. So, here's a question for you. The ones watching from your cities and countries. Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. Let me know who's with me on this journey. If this story gripped you, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more raw, gripping tales of betrayal and revenge, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next thrilling saga. An epic story waiting to unfold right here. Remember, every story has an ending, but the real legacy is in the choices we make after the storm passes. Let's walk that road together. Until next time, thank you for being here.